haven't checked the weather yet, but I know it is the perfect day to chat about adult Jewish literature. I'm Cheryl Stahl. Thanks for joining me here at Nice Jewish Books. Hi, today it is my pleasure to welcome Fabrice Sapolsky to talk about The Last Jewish Daughter of Kaifeng, an intertwined story.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, I'm so happy. This comic book graphic novel is amazing in so many different ways that we will get into. But it seems like, since this is not the first one, that we need some backstory from a couple of different directions. So first, can you tell me about the Intertwined universe?
So the Intertwined universe it's a series that originally was not designed to be a creator-owned comic. I'm going to take you back to 2014. In 2014, I was living in France, my home country. I was still living there. I was on my way to getting my visa and stay in the United States, but I was still in France. And I met these group of Chinese entrepreneurs. They were in video games. They were looking for IPs, intellectual properties, and they were looking for ways to develop on the American market by creating something that was kind of like Marvel Comics. They were like totally amazed by what Marvel did, creating the comics, then creating a studio, then making movies. And they were like, we want to do the same in China. So we had a series of conversation, and they invited me to spend 10 days with them in Beijing in February of 2015, where the idea was to develop a budget, throw ideas and lay down foundations for a new universe, which would have been of Chinese characters in the US for the American market, but fully exploitable in China. So they recruited me to conduct this consulting mission. And so I went, and on the plane to Beijing, I got this idea for Intertwined, which at the time was called The Spirit of the Earth. And the Spirit of the Earth, which is the main character for the Intertwined series, the Spirit of the Earth was based on Chinese cosmology, where you have earth, water, wood, fire, and metal. These 5 elements are the ones holding up the universe. And in my story, at the dawn of time, elements themselves choose a champion, which will defend their element. These champions are called the spirits in that universe. And so we would follow the Spirit of the Earth as he starts his career, and it was kind of like a coming of age story with this person. And I wanted him to be an immigrant. I wanted him to be a reluctant hero. I wanted him to have this kind of almost Peter Parker, Spider-Man type of personality, very resilient. And yeah, it was like kind of creating a Chinese Spider-Man. And I was really into this thing. And as I was building that thing, and remember, it was a 12-hour plane trip, so I had a long time to think about it. The thing that I wanted to do as a supporting character was to introduce a character that was even more of a reluctant hero than the hero itself. And this is where I thought of this silly idea of an Asian Yentl. And I was like, this is interesting. What if the main character, Juan, meets this woman posing as a man who fled China to escape a forced marriage? And so I started developing that, and then I pitched it to the Chinese company. They really liked it, but the thing that made everything fizzle was that I told them that to run a comic book studio in the US, I would need $3 million. and they really basically told me, oh, that's great, but we're never going to give that much money to a non-Chinese. Okay, well, then everything that I thought of is mine. And when I came back, I simply couldn't let go of this concept. And then as I moved to the United States a few months later, I wouldn't say touring, but I was in Chinatown, and I clicked, and I was like, okay, Chinatown, Juanjin, the character of Long Huo, who is Leah under her male secret identity, and everything started to fall into place. And but I wanted to do something that was kung fu related because I've always been a very a kung fu fan, a Bruce Lee fan, a kung fu fan, and I met Frederick Pham Chuang, and Fred Pham Chuang, who is the original artist for Intertwined, is not just a wonderful comic book artist, he's also a martial artist. He's from a long line of martial artists in his family. His father owned the dojo. His grandfather was a kung fu master. It's something that he's DNA, and so he's very accurate kung fu. He said like, I want to do this project with you, but I want the kung fu to be accurate. And I'm like, of course, this is what we want. We want accuracy in kung fu. So we brought it together, and this awesome sauce was like taking life like in front of us. Like we did a Kickstarter, uh, we succeeded. We started working on it. It was hell to produce the first series because I was going through personal issues. He was going through personal issues, but we did it. And in 2016, we started publication. We went to a publisher called Dynamite Comics first. They published the first edition of Intertwined, but we were never happy with the way they presented our work, the way they sold it, or rather couldn't really understand how to sell it. So we had to wait 5 years until we could get our rights back. And when we got our rights back, I told Fred, like, look, I'm going to republish Intertwined within my company, Fair Square Comics, and we're going to do it the way it was always intended to be. And I said, like, not only we're going to do that, but we're going to do more because that's enough. We've waited long enough to have more Intertwined. This series is popular. We sold all editions combined over 4,000 copies of the original Intertwined graphic novel, which is a lot for an independent publisher. And last year, when I told Fred that I wanted to do the spinoff, The Last Jewish Daughter of Kaifeng, specifically based on Leah, he said, well, I'm not sure I have it in me. So he helped me put together the project. He designed Leah's costume and other characters' costume, and he oversaw the kung fu scenes in the book. But I worked with two other wonderful artists on Last Jewish Daughter, and that kind of like took me back a few years to a few years ago when I was developing Intertwined, and I fell in love with them again. And right now, Fred and I are preparing the second volume of Intertwined that should be out late 2024, early 2025. It's going to be a big thing.
That's great. So you mentioned the Jews in Kaifeng, and I actually knew
Yeah.
about this community because I worked at Hebrew Union College for many years, and in their library in Cincinnati, they have a couple handfuls of documents, just amazing documents from that
Yeah.
community, that shows their Hebrew and Chinese names side by side and prayer books
Yes.
and other things. So, but probably most people don't know about that community. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. Let's say that I became first aware of the Kaifen community 30 years ago in 1993 as I was researching, because at the time I was a group leader for a Jewish scout movement in my youth years. And we did a summer, not a summer camp, a winter camp based on with a theme that was the Jewish community of Kaifeng. And so to prepare those activities for the kids, we went into a lot of research. And back in the day, I was like, I really want to do something else with that, but I don't know what. And then I became this creator of comics and graphic novel. And I remember that, you know what, this is the medium. This is the best way to do it, is to bring this community through fiction. And it's kind of like historical fiction. Like, yes, there's supernatural elements, but everything that is related to the community is something that I researched heavily, and my interest in the community of Kaifen never faded over the years. So I did extensive research to get to what you saw in the graphic novel. But the most beautiful thing is that since the book came out, it it allowed conversations like, of course, the Jewish community of Kaifeng is extinct. And even though you have a kind of a renaissance now, you have conversions happening in China. Let's not forget that we're talking about a country that still to this day doesn't recognize Judaism as a religion or a culture. So it's very difficult for them to do any kind of practice, any kind of folklore, because it's not official, it's not legal. But the thing that it created, that to me is just as beautiful, is that it created a feeling among Asian Jews in America who, for the first time, felt seen. And I'm doing a lot of Comic Cons and shows all across the country and in Canada. And now every time there's a couple of Asian Jews who come to the table, see it, and say, "That's me. Thank you."
That's wonderful.
We feel that is wonderful. And, you know, as Jewish people, we're kind of used being a minority. And I come from a country where it was never forgotten. You know, we were always a minority. But in the US, this feeling for a lot of American Jews has been forgotten for a long time. And the fact that you have these communities within communities, these very diverse Jews, made people realize that we've always been like that. We've always been diverse. We've always been inclusive. Because no matter who you are, if you have in your heart that you belong to this community, then kol hakavod, welcome.
Right, absolutely. All right, so let's get back to the story itself and this volume. So, can you tell us kind of where Leah is and what's going on?
So when Last Jewish Daughter of Kaifeng starts, we are after the events of Intertwined. So at the very tail end of the original Intertwined story, Leah is gifted with the powers of the spirit of water that she inherits from Lady Xia, who died in battle and paid for her crimes. And the end is open. The ending is open in Intertwined. So you understand that she got this ability, but you haven't seen those develop. And so when we open, we're 6-8 months later. So she knows who she is. She knows her abilities, and she is ready. She is now herself. She's like looking like a woman. She dropped she's not in fear anymore. And those powers give her the feeling that she can defend herself instead of running. And so when the new story starts, the reason why she left China comes to Chinatown, and they're there to bring her back because it took them all this time to find her. But when they finally find her, they try to bring her back by force. She defends herself. She
So
beats.
these are kind of the minions of the person she was supposed to marry.
Exactly. Yes, absolutely. Who never accepted that she fled. He has a huge ego, and so, but even the fact that she defeats those minions, those goons, she realizes that she needs to face the music. She needs to look at her past and also she's been separated from her family for a long time, and it's really time. 3 years have passed since she left China. It's really time that she fixes everything once and for all and face Yuk-Wong Leung, the drug lord, the crime lord that is the person who wanted to marry her by force. So she goes back, and this is where the story begins. And I'm not going to say everything, of course. You would have to read it, but let's say that it triggers a lot of things: PTSD, memories. There's a lot of stuff about what being a Jew. The story takes place in 1972. So what it is to be a Jew under Mao Zedong, it's really something, you know. And again, I had to research a lot because talking about China today is kind of easy. You go to China, you talk to Chinese people, you look around and see, but what about 1972? What would have been her state of mind? How were women treated in at that time?
It was a very closed society.
Absolutely, where there was not a lot of communication whatsoever. So I discovered a ton, and of course, all the cities that are modern enough that didn't exist back then. You know, Shenzhen that did not exist. It was a terrible like place that was not even a village. So, and in 25, 30 years, they built this gigantic city of like millions of people. So it was before all that. And so it takes us to a time that has been lost, you know, that doesn't exist anymore.
One thing that I loved, and you mentioned this, is the joining of the Chinese folklore or mythology and Jewish components.
Yes.
So she has this water spirit, but she sees it not just as this Chinese spirit, but as a gift from God.
Yes.
You know, in the Jewish context. And at one point, when she's in a tough spot, she starts chanting psalms.
Yeah, it was very important to me. So we're talking about Jewish representation. This is something that we're talking about all the time in comics in particular, because there's a lack of Jewish representation, which is incredible. Like, this is an industry that for 90% of it has been created by Jewish people. But the category, the group that is the least represented in comics are Jews. Because historically there was anti-Semitism, fear. There was a lot of elements who prevented the Jews from exposing their culture in their own comics. And then now a lot of Jews are integrated or passing, and it's not as important for a lot anymore. But I come from another country. My bringing is different, and I always fought for my Judaism to exist, and I'm not afraid to show it. So it was important for me that this character was not another secular Jew, especially when you come from a country where your faith is not recognized. You have to fight against everything to preserve your culture. So yeah, Leah is a modern Orthodox. The closest thing to what she is a modern Orthodox. And I wanted that to be a part of her personality. And so yes, she like one of the first scenes where you see Leah in the original Intertwined, she's in the synagogue, she's in the Bialystok synagogue in New York, and she's praying in Hebrew. And she goes talk to the rabbi who kind of like adopted her when she came from China. The first thing that she did was to find a synagogue, because there was no synagogue where she lived. And so that element, that component, was very, very important for me as who she is. And there's a scene about page 20 of the Last Jewish Daughter book where she's wearing a costume that was the costume of the previous Spirit of Water, and she decides consciously to change it to something that is more her. And she has a high, she has she wears like this necklace with a chai, and she and her costume is more tzniut than the previous one.
More modest.
Yes, more humble. And she realizes that this is more her personality. This is her, rather than being the other person who wore the mantle before her. And she allows herself, as the story progresses, she allows herself to be herself. Like, again, this is another coming of age story. I love writing coming of age stories. This is another coming of age stories because she is becoming herself. She started this journey when we meet her for the first time in the original Intertwined, and when we see her in Last Jewish Daughter of Kaifeng, and you see between the first page and the last page, you see her journey.
Right. Yeah, there was one small, beautiful scene, I think, with her mother going to the market and buying pork.
Yeah.
And then going home and giving it to a Christian friend. Yeah. Because it's sort of part of the disguise of
absolutely,
not wanting to flaunt their Jewishness. So she buys the pork, but
she is giving it, she's training it for matzah. She's training it for matzah because she doesn't have access to matzah, and her Christian friend has more connections and can smuggle that from somewhere else, and so that's the trade, which makes her undetectable. But at the end of the day, the important thing for her is to have matzah for Passover, and so it's. I thought it was an interesting scene to create, because of course that's what you would do. Like, that's the fascinating thing about Judaism, is that there's the law, and there's how much we can bend the law just to survive, mm-hmm. for our Judaism or our life to keep existing. And that was the idea there. If you're in danger, or if something like puts you in danger because you're Jewish, you have to cloak yourself in order to keep being alive, because life is sacred.
I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about your artwork. And I know actually you had 7 front pages, so I want you to talk about that, 7 cover images. But there's a long list of artists and people involved in this. And the artwork is really spectacular. And part of it is the action that you see in the fight scenes, that you just, in this still image, you really see the motion. But also because she's a water spirit, or has this water spirit, the transparency and the wetness and the way the water interacts with everything, it is just wonderfully done.
Thank you. So just a note about the covers. So this is very standard in our industry, in the comic book industry, to have variant covers, to give people the choice to get the art that speaks the most to them. So you also have collectors who will buy all the covers. It happens. So we didn't have 7, we had 6 covers.
Oh, 6, sorry.
We had 6 covers. I personally drew cover A, but it goes to cover cover F, sorry. So the interesting choice is who got to draw a cover for this book. So I was cover A, Fred Pham Chuang, the original artist, is cover B, which made sense. Cover C and D were actually created for the previous Intertwined, but never used, from 2 wonderful artists. One is Canadian, Nick Bradshaw, and the other one is Asian French, Gerald Parel. And then you have Frank Uzan, who is an Israeli artist, and Will Torres, who's a Puerto Rican American artist. So we have some kind of like very ecumenic and international group to create those covers, and I really like that. I mean, I really like that you can have all flavors. And I mean, if I had the time and the budget, I would have done more, because I think that we need everyone on board. We need everyone to care about this, And if you never cared about the Jews or never cared about Kung Fu, you can still find something you like in Intertwined, the Last Jewish Daughter of Kaifeng, through the art. And so for the interiors, I worked with two artists. The first one is Fei Chen, who is an artist who lives in China. I think she lives in Beijing. She did the first 18 pages of the story, but then she hit a snag, and she couldn't deliver anymore. She was very slow and she had other activities. And so I had to recruit another artist whose name is Sangui Sangui. And Ho is from Malaysia. He's a Malaysian artist, extremely gifted. But even him, he got overwhelmed working on the series and the tight deadline. And Will Torres helped me finish the book by inking some of the pages. I inked also myself a few pages along the way, and Will inked all the other pages. It was really a collective work.
Okay, would you take a step back and talk about what those different steps are? What do you mean by inked?
So a page in a comic book, it's like Ford Model T back in the day. So the comic book process is there's division of labor. Because we're under tight deadlines and because creators have many projects going on, there's division of labor. So you have often an artist who does the pencils, an artist who does the inks, an artist who does the colors, an artist who does the lettering, etc., etc. And so in this case, I had to organize production in a way that wouldn't slow us down. And so that's how you have multiple people working on the pages.
Were any of you in the same place, or was this all done remotely?
Not at all. Not at all. Everything was done remotely.
Yeah, I just loved all the little details of showing the Jewishness. She had a mezuzah on her door.
And she owns a kosher Chinese restaurant in Chinatown. That's the first page.
She's teaching Juan how to cook kosher style.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's say, I think we mentioned the language that I loved. It's, of course, mostly in English, but that there is this sprinkling of Hebrew and also Chinese amongst the Chinese characters.
Yes. Yeah, it was important for me because first it keeps the authenticity of the characters. You know, it's very hard when you're working in written form to have characters speak with their own voice. So yes, you can write the characters a little differently, but if you add this extra layer of authenticity to the characters by having a few words or sometimes just like curse words, that brings a little more emotion and realness to the characters. So yes, there's some Hebrew, there's some Cantonese, some Mandarin, and it was the same in the original Intertwined, and it's the same in all the comics that I create. So it's kind of like a house style, if you want.
So if someone wanted to get a copy of this, since you mentioned that the print volumes have been sold out, what is the best way?
Yes. So as of today, both Intertwined and Intertwined, the Last Jewish Daughter of Kaifeng are sold out in stores. Intertwined Volume 1 is sold out everywhere. We sold the very last copies at New York Comic Con very recently. We still have a few Last Jewish Daughter of Kaifeng that can be ordered on our website, fairsquarecomics.com. Now, what's going to happen is that we are going to reprint both in one volume. We're going to have an omnibus edition that will come up in March of 2024 that will contain all the original Intertwined story, plus the bonuses, plus Last Jewish Daughter of Kaifeng, plus a new story that I'm not talking yet about. But yeah, it's going to be interesting, and next year is going to be a very intertwined year because, as I mentioned, we're also doing a volume 2. So there will be the omnibus, and there will be volume 2 later in the year, early 2025. So I'm not going to rush it, but I currently have written about 50 pages of the second volume out of 148. So I'm about 1/3 done with the writing, and Fred is busy on another project, so he's not available until the end of the year anyway. So we're going to really start working on Intertwined for real early 2024, and hopefully will get us through the whole year.
Sounds great. And okay, I'll make the snarky comment anyway. It's like, just throw in some extra covers at the beginning, and then you'll be halfway done.
Well, no. Because there won't be there will be one cover for each volume this time, so it's going to be a little different. That said, I wanted to say something about this, because the reason why Intertwined and Intertwined, the Last Jewish Daughter of Kaifeng, are very important to me is that first, as I said, it's the first book that I wrote when I came to America. So my experience as an immigrant was extremely fresh, and I've been in the U.S. for 8 years now. So it was a very important book for me, because it was kind of like a chronicle of what I was living, even though not as dramatic as the events depicted in Intertwined. The second thing is, it's important because Leah is the first openly Jewish character that I write. It took me all this time to actually have the courage to write a Jewish character, and I made a promise to myself, is that from now on, every book that I will create will have a significant and original Jewish character in it. So I have 2 other projects that I'm working on right now. One is called No Future, where you have an African-American Jew, and the other one is called High from the Sky. I know it's a little cryptic, but which has a character that is a metaphor for Fabrice Sapolsky. Is half Sephardi, half Ashkenazi. He's in his 50s, and he has a lot of insecurities. So it's a little bit of me, but it's not named Fabrice, but people will read it will see me through this character.
That's wonderful. It sounds like it'll be a great project. But I do want to mention, you say half Ashkenazi, half Sephardi, and many people think that those are that sums up all the Jews. But as you just said, there are Chinese Jews. My last interview was about the Beta Yisrael, the Ethiopian Jews, who lived all for thousands of years not knowing that there were white Jews. The only Jews they knew were black. Yes.
We're black.
So, there is amazing diversity within the Jewish community.
Absolutely. And speaking of that, there's the event that I'm partnering with the Center for Jewish History to bring an event called JewceThe that takes place November 12th in New York City. And I got to design all the style guide elements for the show. I did the logo, I'm doing the trophy, and I created a bunch of Jewish superhero characters, including a Beta Israel character, actually. And I called them the JewceThe League.
You want to spell that?
JewStice League, the JewceThe League. And there are 7 characters that are as many different shades of Judaism as you can find. And I like to think that not only we're diverse, but we're too many people think, and including a lot of Jews thinking themselves as just a religion. This is not the case. We are an ethnicity. We are an ethno-religion. We have so many components to who we are: faith, language, culture. It's just more than just a law and faith. We're kind of unique on this planet, and we should show our colors a little better. I'm currently working on an anthology. I partner with a group called Lashon, and which is a nonprofit organization showcasing diversity in Judaism. And we are working on this anthology called Kaifen, which is going to be released fully in 2024, but we're previewing it at the JewceThe event in November this year, where it's real stories from real Jews from every possible walk of life. We have a Better Israel, we have a trans Jew, we have an Asian Jew in the preview, but we're going to have Persian, we're going to have Bukhari, we're going to have all these kind of different Jews that will be represented in this anthology, because we need to show this variety of colors, this multiple flavors of who we are. And there's a line in Last Jewish Daughter that I really like. Is when Leah's dad said, like, you don't really look Jewish. He looks to Juan, who's also an Asian person like him, and he said, like, you don't really look Jewish. And Leah replies, like, Dad, you shouldn't say something like that. This is racist. And that such thing doesn't exist. And it doesn't exist because there's not one way of looking Jewish. There are millions of ways. And that's the takeaway. That's my experience. I've met Jews from everywhere, whether it's in the United States and Israel, in Europe, everywhere. And it's just like so much pride to meet a Jewish person that is not like you. So interesting.
Yeah, I laughed when I read that line for just that reason, knowing there's not a look.
There's not a look, yes. No, but to me, it was a funny scene because you have two Asian people looking at each other like, you don't look like Jewish. You don't look Jewish, which was funny.
Yeah. So is there anything you wanted to bring up that I haven't thought to ask you about?
Well, if you haven't booked your ticket for Juice, now's the time. JewceThe.org, and the event is going to take place.
Okay, spell that again.
Juice, JEWCE.org. Juice stands for Jewish Comics Experience. Jewish Comics Experience, November 12th. It's in New York City, and everyone is welcome. There's an exhibit that already started at the Center for Jewish History with my art in it, and with plenty of great stuff that is covering the beautiful relationship between Jews and comic books through time and space.
And there's also a remote component too, if you're not in New York, right?
Absolutely, yes. If you're not in New York, you can't make it to New York on the day of, they have a virtual pass where you can attend all the panels. There will be 12 panels and 6 workshops. You can attend all the panels with your virtual pass. And honestly, it's going to be beautiful. And we're living troubled times where it's not easy being Jewish. And I think we need those stories. We need to tell our own stories. We need to show who we are. We need to do a better job of showing the world that we are these incredibly generous, open-minded, and tolerant people.
The last question I always ask, and I'm kind of starting to tear up actually, is if you were to use your book or just this platform for any call for tikkun olam, for repairing the world. This is 1 week after the Hamas massacre and attack on Israel. So what would you like that call for action to be?
I mean, I'm an artist. I'm a writer. I'm an artist. I'm a creator. Of course, my emotions are all scrambled. They've been scrambled for a week. It's hard to think. And the first reaction is emotion. It's gut. You react with your gut. Then you react with your heart. Then you react with your mind. I'm urging people to react with the mind. Like, the other party is human just like us. Not everyone is a terrorist. Not everyone is a bad person. We need to be the bigger person. we need to think with our heads. We need to, and it's not just an Israel thing, because every time Israel is targeted, Jews all around the world are suffering. There are hundreds of anti-Semitic acts that are witnessed all across the planet. I've seen things that I never thought I would see in my entire lifetime. Demonstration with people like chanting, gas the Jews, gas the Jews. It's just horrible. But we are resilient. We survived everything so far. We need to survive, and we need to survive by also rising above and think with our head, think with our heart, and not just with our guts. Weapons are never going to solve any conflict. We need to talk.
Amen. Amen. If people want to contact you, how would they do so?
I'm very easy to find on Instagram at Fabrice Sapolsky, on Facebook at Fabrice Sapolsky, or through Fair Square Comics. There's a phone number. There's on the website. There's a phone number, and it goes straight to me. If you want to text me, don't call me. I don't have time for calls, but people can text me if they want precise information. I always try to answer everybody, even though it's difficult. But more so, I invite people to show up at Comic Cons and comic book festivals all across the country. I will be on the West Coast, where you are right now, the first weekend of December for Los Angeles Comic Con, where I will be a guest. I'll be in Minneapolis early November. There's Juice in mid-November. So I'm traveling all the time, meeting people, talking about this. I'm going to Canada. I'm going to Europe. I'm going to all these places because I want people to discover these beautiful stories, and not just my stories. My company, Fair Square Comics, is the only family, immigrant, and minority-owned comic book company in America. And we are releasing tons of books. I mean, tons. About 20 a year, which for me is a ton. I mean, it probably weighs a ton or more, but like a lot of books that are mainly from underrepresented categories of creators and people with unique stories that need to be read and told.
Well, Fabrice Sapolsky, thank you so much for speaking with me about your amazing comic book, The Last Jewish Daughter of Kaifeng, and Intertwined story.
Thank you very much.
If you are interested in any of the books we discussed today, you can find them at your favorite board and brick or online bookstore, or at your local library. Thanks to Dianki for use of his Freilich, which definitely makes me happy. This podcast is a project of the Association of Jewish Libraries, and you can find more about it at www.jewishlibraries.org/nicejewishbooks. I would like to thank AJL and my podcast mentor, Heidi Rabinowitz. Keep listening for the promo for her latest episode.
Hi, this is Emily Bowen-Cohen, author of the book Two Tribes. I'll be joining you soon on the Book of Life podcast. I'd like to dedicate my episode to my grandmother, Mama Mary Etta Colbert, who was born in 1923 and went to Chilocco Indian School. And she loved me, and that's carried me for my whole life.
The Book of Life is the sister podcast of Nice Jewish Books. I'm your host, Heidi Rabinowitz, and I podcast about Jewish Kidlit. Join me to hear my November 2023 conversation with Emily Bowen-Cohen about Two Tribes.